The morning began with a soft glow slipping through the curtains, and she woke with a quiet smile, her heart already light with excitement. It was their anniversary, her favorite day of the year, because it was the reminder of the moment their love story had officially begun. She stretched gently, feeling warmth rush through her chest as she thought of all the years they had spent together, the laughter they had shared, the promises they had made. Today, she wanted everything to feel magical again. She slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him, and headed to the kitchen to prepare a surprise breakfast. As she whisked batter, sliced fruit, and arranged the table, memories played in her mind like a soft movie. How he used to hug her from behind while she cooked, how he would tease her about adding too much sugar, how he would always say he was the luckiest man alive. That thought alone made her smile wider. While the pancakes warmed and the aroma filled the house, she arranged fresh flowers in the vase he had given her on their first wedding anniversary. Every small gesture today felt sacred to her. After everything was set, she went to get ready, slipping into the dress he once said made her look like the most beautiful woman in any room. She brushed her hair slowly, applied her makeup with extra care, and whispered to her reflection, "Today will be perfect." She wanted to recreate the glow they once had, the warmth that had carried them through so many ups and downs. Her heart felt full, wrapped in love and trust so deep she couldn't imagine anything breaking it. She had no idea that while she prepared her perfect morning, fate was quietly preparing to break her in ways she never thought possible. The morning's excitement slowly began to dim as she noticed his unusual silence. She had sent him a cheerful anniversary message, followed by a quick picture of the breakfast she made, expecting his usual warm reply. Instead, the message remained unread. She called once, thinking he might be busy. Then twice. Then a third time. Each call rang endlessly before going to voicemail. A small pinch of uneasiness tugged at her heart, but she forced herself to breathe, telling herself he was probably caught up with something important. Maybe he was planning a surprise. Maybe he stepped into a meeting. Maybe he wanted the celebration to feel extra special by being mysterious. She tried to cling to those hopeful excuses, but the knot in her chest kept tightening. As the hours passed, his replies finally trickled in, short, vague, and rushed. "Busy. We'll call later. Don't worry." That last message, instead of comforting her, made her stomach twist. He didn't forget their anniversary, right? She glanced at her phone repeatedly, hoping for a longer message, a voice note, anything that felt like him. But silence stretched on like a heavy curtain between them. The warm home she had prepared began to feel strangely cold. She tried to distract herself by cleaning up the kitchen and adjusting the flowers again, pretending everything was fine, but her mind kept circling back to him. Where was he? Why wasn't he calling? Why did his words feel distant? She walked around the house aimlessly, battling two voices inside her, one whispering that he was planning something sweet, the other warning her that something was deeply wrong. The longer his silence lingered, the more that second voice grew louder. By noon, hope and fear were tangled so tightly in her chest that she didn't know which one to listen to anymore. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting a bright, almost cruel light on what was supposed to be a day of joy. She kept glancing at the clock, expecting him any minute, but the hours stretched on endlessly. He had promised to be home early, to spend their anniversary together, yet every minute that passed chipped away at her excitement. Her heart, once brimming with anticipation, began to flutter with unease. She tried to shake it off, telling herself he must be stuck in traffic or held up with work. But as time passed and the minutes turned into hours, the excuses that had once comforted her now sounded hollow. She called again, her voice trembling slightly as she left yet another message. Each unanswered call made the pit in her stomach grow heavier. The house felt unbearably quiet, the laughter of earlier memories replaced by the oppressive silence of uncertainty. She checked her phone again and again, as if Sherwell could make him appear on the other end of the line. Every vibration raised her hopes, only to be crushed by empty notifications. Her mind raced through every possible scenario, some realistic, some painfully irrational. Maybe he forgot. Maybe something happened. Or worse, maybe he didn't care. The thought was unbearable, but it gnawed at her relentlessly. Anxiety clawed at her chest, her hands shaking slightly as she contemplated what to do next. Finally, unable to bear the suffocating weight, she decided to go find him. Her mind insisted she was overthinking, that she was letting worry cloud her day, but her heart refused to listen. Each step toward the car was heavy with dread, her pulse hammering in her ears. The thought of confronting the truth, whatever it might be, made her stomach twist violently. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her breath uneven, knowing that the perfect anniversary she had imagined was slipping further from her grasp. She pulled up the map on her phone, her hands slightly trembling as she followed the little blue dot that marked his location. Her breath caught when it led her to an upscale restaurant, one they had visited countless times in the early days of their relationship. Memories of romantic dinners, laughter, and whispered promises flooded her mind. Confusion hit her like a punch to the chest. Why was he here without her? This was supposed to be their day, their celebration, and yet he was somewhere else, smiling, eating, and sharing moments that should have belonged to both of them. Her chest tightened, but a small spark of hope flickered inside her. Maybe it was a surprise. Maybe he had reserved the place for something special she wasn't yet aware of. She told herself that, clinging to the tiniest shred of optimism as she stepped out of her car. The moment she pushed the door open, the warm glow of the chandeliers and the soft music that had once made her feel so at home hit her with a cruel irony. Couples laughed, toasting to their own happiness, while she felt as though the walls themselves were closing in on her. Her steps slowed as she walked through the restaurant, the elegant aroma of fine dining mixing with the bitterness rising in her throat. Every familiar corner, every polished table seemed to mock her, reminding her of how things had once been perfect. She gripped her purse tightly, as if holding onto it could somehow steady her unraveling heart. Her eyes darted across the room, scanning each table, searching for him, praying that she was mistaken. But the longer she looked, the more the hope inside her shrank. Her hands trembled slightly, fingers curling around the edge of her bag, as she tried to prepare herself for whatever she was about to see. The suspense twisted her insides, a mixture of dread and disbelief, as the familiar restaurant transformed into a stage for heartbreak she hadn't imagined. Her eyes locked on the table near the back, and the sight made her entire body freeze as if time itself had stopped. There he was, her husband, sitting across from another woman. The soft candlelight flickered between them, illuminating the warmth of their laughter, the intimacy of hands brushing over the table. Every small gesture she had once thought sacred between them was being mirrored in someone else's presence. Her chest tightened painfully, each breath growing heavier as disbelief sank deep into her bones. Her mind couldn't process it at first, it seemed unreal, like a cruel mirage meant to torment her. She blinked rapidly, hoping it would vanish, that this scene was only a nightmare that would dissolve if she looked away. But it didn't. Every laugh, every shared glance, every casual touch was a dagger twisting in her heart. She felt numbness wash over her, her arms heavy at her sides, her legs refusing to move. She wanted to scream, to run, to demand answers, yet her voice was trapped somewhere in her throat, swallowed by the storm of betrayal. Her lips trembled uncontrollably, her fingers curling into the edges of her bag as though gripping it tightly could anchor her to sanity. The memories of their anniversaries, the breakfast she had prepared, the dresses she had worn with love and hope, it all crashed down on her at once, a tidal wave of heartbreak she hadn't imagined possible. Her eyes stung with unshed tears, but the tears didn't come, they were held hostage by her stunned disbelief. She watched, almost in a detached horror, as he leaned in toward the other woman, their faces close, sharing smiles and murmured words meant only for them. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, but in the ease, the comfort, and the unashamed intimacy. Her mind screamed for him to stop, for reality to bend back in her favor, but it refused to obey. The world she had trusted, the life she had cherished, crumbled in front of her, right there under the warm glow of the restaurant lights. Her heart shattered into fragments she feared might never heal, and her anniversary, a day meant for love and celebration, became the scene of her deepest, most gut-wrenching heartbreak. Each second she stood there, paralyzed by the sight, carved the pain deeper, leaving her world irrevocably altered. Her footsteps felt impossibly heavy as she walked toward the table, each step echoing like a drum in her ears. The ambient chatter of the restaurant seemed to fade, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed against her chest. When she reached the table, all eyes seemed to turn toward them. The couple's laughter froze mid-sentence. He looked up, his eyes widening in panic as recognition and guilt collided on his face. The mistress shifted nervously, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, as if sensing the storm about to hit. She stood there, trembling but refusing to retreat, her hands curling at her sides, nails digging into her palms. Her voice, though breaking at moments, carried a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Explain this. Now. Why are you here with her?" The words trembled with pain, yet they were unwavering, a demand for the truth she had earned long before this moment. His face turned pale, his carefully composed charm faltering. He opened his mouth, stammering, It's not what it looks like," but the words fell flat, powerless against the damning reality before them. Every movement, every glance he had shared with her in the candlelight betrayed him. The evidence of his betrayal was written in the most undeniable language, their laughter, their touches, the way his hand lingered too long. Around them, other diners began to glance over, whispers spreading like wildfire. Her humiliation and heartbreak were no longer private, they had become a spectacle for everyone to witness. And yet, she stood tall in her pain, refusing to allow fear or shame to dictate her reaction. Her tears began to fall freely as the weight of betrayal bore down on her. She had loved him with every fiber of her being, and this was how he repaid that love. Without another word, she turned on her heel, walking out of the restaurant with her head high despite the storm inside her. Each step away was a mix of heartbreak and liberation, leaving him frozen in shock, guilt, and despair. He had no words, no gestures, no excuses left that could bridge the chasm he had created. The reality of his actions struck him fully only as her figure disappeared into the night, leaving him alone at the table, the mistress still smirking nervously but suddenly aware that she, too, was a witness to the destruction he had caused. The road stretched ahead, blurred by the tears that streamed down her face, each drop burning with the sting of betrayal. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, as her chest tightened with every heartbeat. Memories flashed unbidden, laughter from past anniversaries, whispered promises, soft kisses and quiet moments, all of it twisting into cruel reminders of what had been stolen from her. The vision of him leaning toward another woman, smiling, touching her hand, replayed over and over, sharper each time. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision, but the pain only grew heavier, pressing down like an invisible weight on her chest. She remembered their vows, spoken so earnestly, that promised love, loyalty, and devotion. The words now felt like shards of glass embedded in her heart, each one slicing deeper as the reality sank in. The life she had trusted him with, the love she had poured into their years together, felt fractured beyond repair. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps as she fought to stay composed while driving. Every honk, every passerby, every streetlight seemed to mock her grief. She wanted to scream, to shake the world awake to the injustice she had just witnessed, but only silence came in reply. By the time she reached home, the familiar walls felt suffocating, as if they too had betrayed her. The home they had shared no longer felt like a sanctuary but a cage filled with the echoes of treachery. With trembling hands, she began to pack her essentials, each item she placed into her bag a symbolic act of reclaiming her dignity. Her decision was firm, driven not by anger alone, but by the quiet strength that had risen within her through the heartbreak. She refused to linger in a place that had become a reminder of deceit. The drive, the tears, the memories, and the quiet rage all culminated in this act. She was choosing herself, even as her heart felt shattered beyond recognition. The sound of the front door opening made him freeze, hope flickering briefly in his chest, until he saw her standing there, a bag slung over her shoulder, eyes red and glistening from unshed tears. Panic surged through him, an urgent, suffocating force that made his stomach twist. "Wait! Please, don't go," he shouted, rushing toward her, his voice cracking under the weight of fear and guilt. He reached for her hand, gripping it tightly, desperate to anchor her, to stop her from leaving, from walking away from everything they had shared. She looked at him, and for a moment, it seemed as if the world had slowed, the air thick with the tension of countless unspoken words. Her voice, when it came, was cold yet fragile, trembling from the storm of emotion she had been holding back. "There's nothing left to explain," she said, each word deliberate, cutting through his pleas like a blade. "You've said it all with your actions." Her tone carried a firmness born not of anger, but of heartbreak and realization. She would not be swayed by excuses or apologies, no matter how desperate he sounded. He continued to beg, stumbling over words, tears welling in his eyes, but she did not falter. Her grip on his hand loosened, and with a final, steady breath, she turned away. She walked past him, each step heavy yet resolute, and this time, she did not glance back. The sound of her heels echoed down the hallway, leaving a trail of emptiness behind. He sank to the floor, hands still outstretched in futile longing, his chest heaving with guilt and regret. The reality of what he had lost, the consequences of his betrayal, hit him with full force. She disappeared into the night, her figure swallowed by the darkness, leaving him alone in a home that suddenly felt vast, cold, and unwelcoming. The panic that had driven him moments ago now turned into crushing despair as he realized that some things, once broken, could never truly be repaired. The phone never stopped ringing, each vibration a sharp reminder of the chaos he had created. He called incessantly, desperate for her voice, for a single word that would let him know she was still within reach. Each unanswered call twisted the knot of panic tighter in his chest, but she remained unreachable, her number blocked, her mind set on preserving the fragile peace she needed to survive. Not one to give up easily, he turned to family and friends, sending frantic messages, pleading for anyone to tell him where she was, or at least to pass on his desperate apologies. His words were frantic, raw with regret, but none of them could bridge the chasm he had created. Meanwhile, she retreated to a safe, quiet place, one far removed from the memories that had once filled her home with warmth. She spent her days wrapped in solitude, letting the waves of emotion crash over her without restraint. Sadness enveloped her in a heavy cloak, grief cutting deep into her heart with every memory that surfaced. Anger sparked like fire, consuming the remnants of trust she had once placed in him so unconditionally. She allowed herself to feel fully, understanding that healing required confronting the pain, not suppressing it. Each day she spent alone, she rebuilt a fragment of her strength, piece by piece, refusing to allow his betrayal to define her. Meanwhile, he was left to wrestle with the consequences of his own choices. Alone, he reflected on the gravity of what he had done, each realization hitting harder than the last. He saw clearly the depth of the hurt he had caused, the irreparable damage inflicted on the woman he claimed to love. Tears fell freely as he broke down emotionally, the weight of losing her finally pressing down with suffocating intensity. He understood, perhaps too late, that no amount of pleading could undo the pain he had caused, and that the path to forgiveness, if it existed at all, would demand more than desperate calls and frantic apologies. It would demand a transformation he was only beginning to comprehend. Days passed in tense, suffocating silence, and she began to feel the edges of her grief soften just enough to breathe. Then, unexpectedly, he appeared. Her heart lurched at the sight of him, though she kept herself rooted, unwilling to run or react too quickly. His eyes were swollen and red, his face pale, etched with exhaustion and torment. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a raw, almost desperate vulnerability that made her chest tighten further. His voice, when he spoke, trembled uncontrollably, quivering with emotion that words alone could barely contain. "Please. I need to tell you. I'm so sorry," he stammered, the sound of his desperation echoing through the quiet space she had claimed for healing. He poured everything out in that moment, confession spilling like water from a broken dam. He admitted his guilt, his reckless stupidity, the selfishness that had led him to betray her trust so completely. He spoke of the fear that had consumed him, fear of losing her, fear of living without her, fear of facing a life where he had to bear the weight of his own mistakes. Each word cut into him as much as it resonated in her, a stark reminder of how far things had fallen. Then, collapsing to his knees before her, he broke entirely, tears streaming down his face. His hands were outstretched, pleading not just for forgiveness, but for the chance to make amends, to rebuild what he had destroyed. "Just one more chance, please," he whispered, voice cracking with raw, unfiltered emotion. She stood frozen, silent, pain and disbelief etching every line of her face. Her heart ached in tandem with the sight of his suffering, but she said nothing. She simply listened, feeling the weight of his confession wash over her, a mixture of anger, sorrow, and the painful knowledge that trust, once broken, could never be fully restored in a single, desperate plea. She took a steadying breath, her hands still trembling slightly, but her spine was straight, her gaze unwavering. The sight of him on his knees, crying and begging, tugged at a part of her that still loved him, but she forced herself to focus. Her voice, though soft at first, grew stronger with every word, cutting through the tension like steel. "Do you even realize what you've done?" she asked, each syllable deliberate, heavy with pain. "Do you understand the depth of the wound you've caused? The trust you shattered, the years you betrayed?" Her eyes glistened with tears, but they did not blind her, they sharpened her resolve. She let him see her heartbreak fully, the hurt that had been building inside her for days. She spoke of the dreams they had once shared, the love she had given freely, and the life they had planned together, now all tainted by his actions. Her words were not laced with anger alone but with a profound sadness, a mourning for what she had lost in his betrayal. "Love is not a free pass to disrespect me," she said firmly. "It is not a shield to justify your selfishness. Love is trust, loyalty, and care, and you broke all of that." Yet, even as she expressed her pain, she did not allow herself to be consumed by it. She did not collapse at his feet, nor did she rush to judgment. She held her ground, showing him that her self-worth mattered above all. Her strength was evident in her measured response. She valued herself enough to insist on respect, enough to take the time she needed before deciding whether forgiveness or separation was the right path. In that moment, she became the embodiment of dignity, proving that heartbreak could coexist with power, and that her choices would always be guided first by her own integrity and self-respect. He quickly realized that words alone would not mend the chasm he had created. Forgiveness, if it was ever to come, would require more than desperate pleas and tearful confessions. It would demand genuine, sustained effort, a complete reckoning with his mistakes. The first step was acknowledging his flaws openly, accepting responsibility without excuses or justifications. He began attending therapy, seeking guidance on understanding the roots of his selfish choices and learning how to rebuild not just a relationship, but his own character. Each session was grueling, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about himself, his desires, and the ways he had allowed temptation and recklessness to take precedence over love. Simultaneously, he cut all ties with the mistress, severing the threads that had ensnared him in betrayal. It was not a symbolic gesture but a deliberate, tangible action to demonstrate commitment to change. He worked tirelessly on self-improvement, examining habits, making amends in small ways, and showing consistency that went beyond mere words. He knew that earning trust would be a painstaking process, one that could take months or even years. Meanwhile, she observed from a distance, careful not to let hope or doubt cloud her judgment prematurely. Her heart had been wounded so deeply that even glimpses of his effort brought a mixture of wariness and reluctant curiosity. She focused on herself, on reclaiming the sense of wholeness that had been fractured by betrayal. She engaged in activities that nurtured her mind, body, and soul, surrounding herself with supportive friends and moments of quiet reflection. Self-love became her anchor, a shield against being pulled too quickly into vulnerability. In this period, the balance of power shifted quietly. While he fought to prove he was worthy of trust again, she cultivated resilience and independence. The turning point was not immediate forgiveness, but the recognition that true healing, both theirs individually and possibly together, would require patience, honesty, and a steadfast commitment to transformation. After weeks of soul-searching, reflection, and quiet observation, she reached a moment of clarity that had eluded her in the whirlwind of betrayal and heartbreak. The nights of tears, the days of silence, and the constant battle between longing and caution had brought her to a place of profound understanding. She now knew what she truly deserved. Her decision was no longer driven by love alone or by the hope of restoring what had been broken. It was guided by growth, self-respect, and a commitment to her own emotional well-being. She considered everything: the depth of his betrayal, the sincerity of his efforts to change, and her own capacity to forgive without losing herself in the process. She weighed her options carefully, understanding that a second chance would require complete transparency, unwavering effort, and the rebuilding of trust brick by brick. She recognized that forgiveness was not a guarantee of reconciliation, it was a choice she could make only if she believed it would protect her dignity and peace of mind. On the other hand, walking away promised freedom from the lingering pain, a life where her self-worth was never compromised, and the ability to embrace a future unburdened by betrayal. Her heart, while still tender from the wounds, had grown stronger, learning to place her own value above the fear of solitude or societal expectations. In the end, she made her choice, not as a reaction to him, but as a declaration of her own empowerment. Whether it was reconciliation or separation, her decision reflected emotional maturity and a deep understanding of herself. She stood firm in the knowledge that her life, her happiness, and her peace were hers to protect. By prioritizing her boundaries and honoring her growth, she reclaimed control over her story. Her final decision became a testament to resilience, a celebration of self-love, and a powerful reminder that true strength lies in valuing oneself above all else. The days that followed her decision were filled with quiet determination and a renewed sense of purpose. Whether or not he remained in her life no longer dictated the rhythm of her heart. She embraced the freedom that came with choosing herself, recognizing that her happiness was not dependent on anyone else's actions or apologies. Each morning, she woke with intention, carving out moments that nourished her soul and strengthened her resolve. The pain of betrayal remained, but it no longer controlled her, it had become a teacher, guiding her towards self-awareness and emotional resilience. She rebuilt her life gradually, focusing on her passions, her goals, and the relationships that truly mattered. Friends and family became pillars of support, their encouragement a gentle reminder of the love that existed beyond romantic ties. She explored new hobbies, revisited old dreams, and allowed herself to experience joy without guilt or fear. Every step forward, no matter how small, reinforced the truth she had always known: she was capable of thriving on her own. Her heart, though scarred, began to feel whole again, filled with hope and clarity that had been buried beneath layers of hurt. She learned to value her own company, to trust her instincts, and to set boundaries that protected her peace. The lessons of betrayal became a foundation upon which she built strength, wisdom, and courage. In this new chapter, she was no longer defined by the pain of the past but by the choices she made for her future. She chose peace over resentment, self-worth over validation, and healing over despair. Her life became a testament to the power of resilience and the beauty of starting anew. She stepped forward with her head held high, emotionally reborn, ready to embrace whatever the world had to offer, fully aware that her strength and happiness were hers to claim, and no one could take them away.